Pipe Network presents.
Before we get started, just know that this special episode may be subjected to the biases of the host. This is not a full picture summary of the events. The frightening, alarming, real-life tales show strongly recommends not relying on just one source for information. Do your best to research before coming to a conclusion of your own. Listener discretion is advised. On the night of December 30, 2019, at the capital of Hubei, Wuhan, the Medical Administration of Wuhan Municipal Health Committee issued an urgent notice on treatments of pneumonia of an unknown cause. People across the city successively came down with pneumonia, and doctors were puzzled how they got it. This unknown disease had several common symptoms: a fever greater than or equal to 38 degrees Celsius, pneumonia or acute respiratory distress syndrome, and reduced white blood cells. Antibiotics did little to improve the condition significantly.
Viral pneumonia has hit central China's Wuhan city. Authorities have reported 27 cases in total, 7 of which are critical.
This notice spread like wildfire across the internet, and it reached the far ends of the world as mere rumors. However, the next morning, these rumors were confirmed to be true. The frightening, alarming, real-life tales show special. COVID-19 and the diseases that plague the Philippines. On January 1 of the new year, the World Health Organization, or the WHO, sprung into action to help identify this unknown cause. They advised the public on what to do during this time and to remain calm but not lax. A few days later, the WHO issued its first disease outbreak news report. It advised everyone to remain vigilant and that their recommendations on public health measures and surveillance of influenza and severe acute respiratory infections still apply. 4 days later, with the combined effort of the medical officials in Wuhan and WHO, they discovered that the outbreak's origins stem from a new type of coronavirus not previously seen in humans. Now knowing how dangerous this outbreak could be, the WHO published a series of documents on what to do during an outbreak of a new disease. It included guides on infection prevention and control, laboratory testing, risk communication and community engagement, travel advice, clinical management, and a national capacities review tool, among others. On January 11, the Chinese media reported the first death from the novel coronavirus. Over the next few days, the WHO would actively collaborate with China to find out more about this new outbreak, while cases sprouted in regions like Europe, Middle East, and Southeast Asia.
Not many deaths. So we're not dealing with high numbers at the moment. If this were flu, we'd be 100 times more than that. You know, that would be worrying, but this is not flu, this is corona. So I'm concerned, but I'm not over-worried about it.
It was then on January 30 that the WHO Director General, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, declared that the novel coronavirus outbreak met the criteria for a public health emergency of international concern, the highest of the organization's level of alarm.
WHO has been assessing this outbreak around the clock, and we're deeply concerned both by the alarming levels of spread and severity and by the alarming levels of inaction. We have rung the alarm bell loud and clear.
This would come to be known as SARS-CoV-2, the cause of the disease COVID-19. But this isn't the only virus us Filipinos will come to know.
If countries detect, test, treat, isolate, trace, and mobilize their people in the response, those with a handful of cases can prevent those cases becoming clusters, and those clusters becoming community transmission.
Hello everyone, I am here right now with Mars, who can tell me her experience of when she got COVID. Hi, Mars.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate you reaching out. Um, I I think it's a conversation that needs to be had, and I'm happy to be part of that conversation.
Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate your eagerness and willingness to share your story with us. So, can you tell me, how did you get sick?
Funny enough, it's only been like 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago. So it's very fresh. I'm not the type that goes outside. I'm not the one that parties or like wants to go out. I'm an indoorsy person. Andrew and a few friends are aware of my nervousness when it comes to going out. I'm very anxious about getting sick. Like going out has been stressful for me. So most of the time I have been staying indoors and I took all the precautions. And no matter how safe I was, it kind of had a domino effect. When someone goes out within the house, it can be carried. Not to fault anyone. There was a worry because I have a housemate. He was careful as well. He was a nurse and he would often go out on weekends, for his stuff. Well, if I'm going to be very blunt about it, for this, I really wish he didn't have to go to that kind of activity, but it's his life. But those kinds of decisions do have that kind of domino effect because it affected the people that stayed with him. He started to have a cough. We were worried about him because he did have a history of tuberculosis. He did have already weak lungs. He asked us about like if we knew any doctors because usually it'll be crowded, or he didn't want to go out unless it's like an appointment because there's like queuing and stuff. He had himself swabbed. He was already coughing quite a lot. One day he gave a call, and it was around the time that I was feeling feverish as well. There was like an onset of fever. I was coughing. When you cough, you feel like there's a shortness of breath. It's like it felt like an asthma and a cough rolled in. And we checked our temperatures. It got to 38, which is terrifying. I got a call from that housemate through a video call. He was in tears. He was apologizing, like, I'm really sorry, Mars. I'm really sorry. I'm positive. I think you guys should get checked too.
Nagdeklara na ng global health emergency ang World Health Organization.
Nakapasok na sa Pilipinas ang 2019 novel coronavirus.
The Department of Health has convened its second interagency task force meeting on the 2019 novel coronavirus acute respiratory disease. Their responsibility is becoming more urgent with the confirmation of the first case in the country.
On the same day that the World Health Organization sounded the alarm, the first confirmed case of COVID-19 in the Philippines was announced by Secretary of Health Francisco Duque.
Today, the DOH is confirming that a 38-year-old female Chinese patient under investigation, or PUI, is positive for the novel coronavirus 2019-nCoV.
As reported by Rappler, senators had been urging the government to shut its borders to and from China to preemptively protect the country from the virus, as they see that the country's capacity to respond to a health emergency crisis is not that strong. Yet despite the pressures from the senators, Duque only recommended travel restrictions to and from Hubei province. He expressed reluctance to implement a travel ban because he was afraid of upsetting the country's relations with China. Duque, however, assured that the Philippines was well equipped to handle the threat of the pandemic.
I assure the public that the DOH is on top of this evolving situation.
The Health Alliance for Democracy, a non-stock, non-profit organization composed of individuals from the health sector, highlighted that the Philippine government is ill-prepared to handle the COVID-19 emergency. The government has no concrete plans to alleviate the fears of the public. They have been neglecting public health for decades in favor of privatized healthcare, and they lack assurance of protection for the frontline health workers. The Philippine President, Rodrigo Roa Duterte, had this to say to those who had feared the threat of the virus.
Let's start with the narratives by saying that everything is well in the country. There's nothing really to be extra scared of that coronavirus thing.
On March 7, the Department of Health confirmed that the virus is now spreading locally. They assured that the efforts to detect and contain the virus are now being amplified. However, when asked about the DOH's preparation and actions, the representatives could only give insufficient answers.
Yun na nga eh.
Yun nga
I
po.
don't want to panic, but
Yes.
you're making me panic. Kasi
You're making me
yung
completely go
naririnig
psycho talaga.
namin ngayon is parang hindi niya pinaghandaan na magkakaroon tayo ng local transmission na mismong si Secretary Duque na yung nagsasabi na it's just a question of when napadating to. And then maririnig namin sa inyo na we only have 2,000 testing kits out of a 100 million population. Diba parang hindi ba nakakatakot?
The very next day, Duterte signed Proclamation number 922, declaring a state of public health emergency. The COVID cases had risen to 24.
Simula mamayang hating gabi, limitado na ang pagpasok at paglabas ng Metro Manila dahil sa community quarantine.
The virus needed to be contained now. President Duterte addressed the nation and placed Metro Manila under community quarantine.
Community quarantine is hereby imposed in the entire of Metro Manila.
This quarantine would last from March 15 to April 14, more than a month. Duterte further emphasized that the lockdown will mean home quarantine for everyone, suspended public transportation, regularization of food distribution and essential health services, and a heightened presence of the fully armed military in checkpoints. Duterte's plan is to control the cases and wait for the vaccine to be developed.
It would only come in a form of a vaccine.
With the rising cases of COVID-19, the government devised and implemented the National Action Plan, or the NAP, and the Bayanihan Heal as One Act to help manage the developing events. Former Armed Forces of the Philippines, or AFP Chief and now Defense Secretary Delphine Lorenzana, was chosen to lead the committee that would oversee the implementation of the NAP, along with former AFP Chief and current Interior Secretary Eduardo Año as the Vice Chair. Former AFP Chief and current Peace Advisor Carlito Galvez Jr. was chosen as the NAP's Chief Implementer. Many people were critical of the visible presence of the police and military on the streets, as well as the appointment of former AFP chiefs to spearhead the response against the pandemic, citing that this is a clear militarized response to the events rather than a medical one. Many people called for a solusyong medikal hindi aksyong militar response, as reported by the Philippine Inquirer that according to Bayan Muna representative Carlos Zarate, more people well-versed about health issues should have been tapped to lead the enforcement of the NAP. However, the president had been very clear that the presence of the military only served to make sure people followed the health and safety protocols while the country waited for the vaccine.
It has nothing to do with the power of the military or the power of the police, nor or my power and of these guys beside me. Hindi yan. It's not an issue of, it's just an issue of protecting public interest and public health. Yun lang.
That terrified me because that's a housemate. That's, somebody that's in the same house, even if there are different rooms. Aaron started to cough as well, and like it was a very tense time. So the way we did it was he contacted the local barangay, and the barangay actually brings like this jeep that brings you. They kind of have that jeep just specifically for the people that that are in that house. And that day when he said, okay, I'm gonna be heading off to the facility, Aaron and I were worried. I was coughing, he was coughing. We were brought from the jeep, as in they personally went to the house, got us, and it was very early in the morning, and I didn't get sleep yet because I work graveyard. So right after shift, I rode the jeep, headed to the center, in Magsaysay. We didn't wait too long, like an hour at most, and we got swabbed. One of the most painful experiences. And like I did, like that kind of penetration is not something you want on yourself. Uh, but we needed to do it. They told us to wait for results, and the next day, right after the next day, that's when I found out you're positive, and they started to make arrangements because you get when you get positive from the center, they already are preparing to put you in a facility for isolation. Like there's no way they would let you isolate in the house. So I was rushing, like panicking for the cats. I have 6 cats here, and I had to leave them for 2 weeks, and the two were just newborns, so it was like really a stressful experience. So yeah, like I don't want to blame my friend for it. I don't ever want to, but since he was positive, I got positive as well. Having somebody in the same house can make you positive, like, and you have to watch out for that. I really felt like shit. Um, like I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to breathe properly. I was dizzy. My body wasn't right. Like it felt like it was like slowly shutting down, and that terrified me. Like I had no control. The whole situation made me feel like I had no control. No matter what I did, no matter the steps that I took, still got sick. No matter how careful I was, no matter how like much I tried to control the variable of me going out, of just staying at home, I still got sick. And the thing that devastated me the most is that I had to drop a lot of, like, because like I have a packed schedule all the time. I would have work, I would run games for the local community here. The day after the test, and knowing that we couldn't do house isolation, they would take us away, I really felt like there's nothing I can do. I just have to accept it. I just have to go along with it. And leaving the cats, that really took a toll on me because I wouldn't know if they're okay. Like the uncle luckily looked after them. And the fact that they destroyed the window and opened the door to look for me made me like very emotional. They know the humans are gone. There was just like a sense of loss. Like I lost a lot of control in that situation. Since we had symptoms, we were really symptomatic, and we had to check our lungs and stuff, and there is damage that there's no turning back from it now. Like luckily it didn't reach the lungs, but there is damage there, and I'm not gonna be the same way afterwards. It changes you for the worst, and you just can't do anything but just accept it.
A week after special powers were granted to the president and the start of the lockdown, more than 100 people from the slums of Sitio San Roque of Quezon City gathered on a highway to protest and demand food and aid. The lockdown had made it impossible for people to earn a living and provide for their families, especially since majority of them were under a no work, no pay rule. The people were hungry, and they were announcing that the food packs provided were not enough. Following the gathering, 21 of the protesters were beaten and arrested by the police. In response to the unrest, Duterte had this to say to the quarantine violators.
I will not hesitate. My orders are sa police pati military, pati mga barangay, na pagka ginulo at nagkaroon ng okasyon na lumaban at ang buhay ninyo ay nalagay sa alanganin, shoot them dead.
In an online webinar organized by the EQ Voice Philippines, as reported by the Philippine Inquirer, UN Special Reporter and Extrajudicial Summary or Arbitrary Executions, Agnes Calamard, warns the dangers of the over-reliance on law enforcement in the COVID-19 response. According to her, people are more vulnerable to the police violence this way.
Other videos that critics say show excessive use of force by police have gone viral too.
There are actually a handful of citizen accounts and video evidence of the military and police using excessive force against community quarantine violators. One of these accounts is the story of Winston Ragos, who was shot dead on April 21, 2020, after Ragos had an argument over the strict rules of people leaving their homes for non-essential tasks with the military near a quarantine control point in Quezon City. According to reports, Ragos turned his back on the cops and reached in his sling bag for a gun. Sensing that this is a sign of aggression, the cops shot him twice on the back before Ragos fell to the ground unresponsive. Bystanders were quick to point out that the man was unarmed. In an investigation after the incident, a gun was found in his pouch, despite family members and witnesses saying that all that was in the pouch was a water bottle. This was further investigated by the NBI, and it was found that Ragos was unarmed and that the cops who shot him planted the gun inside his pouch. The cop who killed Ragos was tried and charged with homicide. On September 8, 2020, it was reported by Rappler that there had been over 100,000 quarantine violators arrested since March. Meanwhile, COVID-19 had reached a total of over 200,000 cases, the highest in Southeast Asia at that time. While hundreds and thousands of people are being arrested for quarantine violations every day, some public officials and servants were actually caught violating the said rules they were meant to uphold.
Nagkaroon ng paglabag sa protocol si Senator Coco Pimentel sa ginawa nitong pagtungo sa Makati Medical Center kahit na naka-quarantine dahil sa COVID-19.
One of the early violators of the quarantine protocol was Senator Coco Pimentel after he was reported to have accompanied his wife to the hospital despite him being a person under investigation for COVID-19 and thus needed to isolate himself at home. Another is the infamous Mañanita of the National Capital Region Police Office Chief, Debold Sinas, who insisted that no mass gathering had happened despite pictures of the night celebrating his birthday were posted online. Days before the Mañanita, he had led the arrest of 10 Marikina volunteers who were holding a feeding program for the displaced jeepney drivers and other members of the community. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque has had multiple quarantine violations. He has been spotted in Subic in the middle of a quarantine, swimming with dolphins, in Boracay when he was supposed to be in isolation, and for holding a mass gathering and for not enforcing the physical distancing rule in Madridejos, among other controversies. The mayor of Panglao Town in Bohol Province was also caught violating safety protocols after she and 16 other people traveled without securing the needed medical clearances and for violating safety protocols. Meanwhile, photos of a mass gathering happening with attendances of 100 village and city leaders of Cebu surfaced online. It violated protocols of limiting gatherings to more than 10 people. Despite the evidence, there are no known reports of these government officials and servants being penalized for their violations. So you had to go through isolation, you said, right? How did it feel? What was your experience with the isolation?
Luckily, I wasn't completely alone. I had Aaron with me. We stayed in the same room. Thankfully, they treated us like a like a married couple. So because there were some like live-ins or boyfriend and girlfriends that were separated. Well, luckily we got to stay in the same room, and it was the longest 2 weeks of my life in a sense. I could not do anything beyond wake up a certain time because they would check your temperature 6 a.m. And also at night 6 p.m. So there was those routine checkups of your temperature. They would monitor you. Um, you couldn't I couldn't do much other than sleep. I luckily brought my laptop, but I had to buy data because like the Wi-Fi was shit. Like that's not the least of my complaints. It's like I was removed from my comforts of home, of course, and like while the place was comfortable, like two big people were able to fit in one bed, and it was AC. I can't say the same for other people that got to stay in places that had a lot of mosquitoes. It was open air. It was loud. There was like we're lucky we had our room. Sure, there was like a small rat there, well, a small mouse, and that would go in and out. But beyond that, Like, I wouldn't say it's the worst, but I wish I didn't have to go through that. Like, it was just because of protocol that we can't do the isolation at the house, and the house was left unattended for 2 weeks. I would say it's like it was really one of my lowest points as well, because I was the type of person that worked a lot. I was always busy with projects and stuff, and I was forced to do a full stop, not out of my own choice, but because I had to, because I was there. Like, I can't be anywhere else but there. I really had like, I had to just go along with it. That's always the feeling, like I'm forced to do this. I have to go along with it. Like, I understand, I guess, that I need to be isolated, like me, and because we had symptoms, but there were people there who were just asymptomatic, did not have the symptoms, and like, and there are people that had symptoms that were going to really crappy places because there wasn't any rooms in the good rooms that where I got to stay. So it was just like confusing. Just, and we were told na, oh, don't take, like, because I wanted to get a swab test just to make sure. Oh, don't take a swab test till after 2 to 3 months, because you might get positive and they'll send you back again. And I'm like, what? So there's no way for me to check if there's still COVID in me or not. I just wish I got to isolate in the house, but I understand. I understand, and at the same time, like, what else could I do? I can't fight the system if that's the protocol.
And how did they treat you? Was it okay?
It was okay. They treated well. Like, the food was given. There's free food. It even got to a point that the fire alarms turned on in our room, and they all freaked out. They went to the room, and then, Mom, are you okay? And I was like, what's going on? I was just in the room. Me and Aaron were in the room. Was it his fart that turned it on? I don't know. Anyways, so they were nice, generally speaking. They told us the protocols. At least they were very, like, they would often send text messages, because they can't, like, beyond the temperature, they don't do a face to face. So they do text messages asking, how are you feeling that day? And they actually do a routine, like, they have your blood tested, they have chest x-rays done, and you just don't pay anything, you just have to go along with it. Generally, the experience with the people there are good. They're patient, and they take a lot of risks being exposed to a lot of people that have COVID, and they wear PPEs, and they've been very accommodating to an extent, with the limitations of the place and the stay there. I can't say anything bad, beyond, like, there's nothing bad really in terms of the people that I've encountered, the people that helped us go in and out.
The number of COVID-19 cases in the country is inching closer towards the 320,000 mark.
It's October 2020, and the Philippines has been battling the virus for a little over 9 months now. The country is in recession due to limited economic activity. Reports by CNN say that because of the long, uneven, and uncertain recovery of the country, our economy is still expected to shrink. The people are angry and disappointed because many are jobless and hungry. Meanwhile, the government remains subpar with its efforts. Through the WHO, the National Center for Mental Health has said that despite the Philippines consistently ranking in the top 5 of the Global Optimism Index, the hotline calls regarding depression has risen from 80 calls pre-lockdown to nearly 400 a month. The virus isn't the only thing the country is battling, however.
The rapid spread of COVID-19 around the world has also seen the spread of false and misleading information, what a United Nations article calls disinfodemic.
You may have seen it around.
It's an mRNA vaccine, innovative medicine, completely untested.
On messaging apps.
Drinking water or other liquids will wash them down through your throat and into the stomach.
Twitter.
And gargle with warm salt water, tea, vinegar, you can eliminate the new coronavirus.
Facebook.
Who would have known that all these solutions to these viruses would be a simple cup of tea?
The internet has paved way for knowledge and information to travel fast and easily. But it's also made misinformation more accessible to the general public, and it's had dire consequences.
Please share this message to your friends and family to make them aware
Please
about
forward to friends and relatives. Raise your hand.
Please wake up.
One of the recent cases of misinformation is the spreading of messages of the dangers of using the new mRNA vaccines such as Pfizer and Moderna. Many of these messages claim that the vaccine changes your genetic structure and that it could prove dangerous to you and your life. Many of these claims come from unchecked sources and chain messages and seek to instill fear and doubt among the public. Many vaccines work by exposing our cells to an imitation of a disease-causing agent or pathogen. Once our immune system recognizes these imitations, they begin to adapt and learn how to defend themselves so that when the pathogen does show up next time, it knows what to do. The new mRNA vaccines do that exact same thing, except the imitations are introduced a different way. There is no scientific evidence that it changes our genetic structure, and it should work like any other normal vaccines. This way of developing vaccines has actually been in the works for decades. It was only with the COVID-19 vaccines that showed evidence of being effective through the clinical trials. The WHO advises everyone to double-check any information with trusted sources such as the World Health Organization website. You can also check and ask the person who sent you the message where the information came from. If you believe that the information is wrong, then you can help stop the spread by reporting the circulating message to the hosting social media platform.
President Rodrigo Duterte's special envoy to China, columnist Ramon Tulfo, admits he and other government officials were inoculated last year with a Chinese-made COVID-19 vaccine that is yet to be authorized here in the Philippines.
It was revealed that last year, Ramon Tulfo, along with some unnamed government officials and the president's security, all received the Sinopharm vaccine despite it not being approved by the FDA for emergency use, meaning the importation and distribution of the vaccine is illegal.
Well, the Food and Drug Administration will investigate the confession of Special Envoy to China, Mon Tulfo. FDA Director General Eric Domingo says he will refer this to the agency's regulatory enforcement unit.
This drew in many negative reactions from different people because it was a clear abuse of their privilege and a clear disregard for the laws of the country. Despite this, however, Tulfo does not feel guilty about what happened and that he had planned on distributing the vaccine once it was approved. One year later, after COVID-19's discovery, and with the combined efforts of the world, the first few vaccines are finally beginning to roll out. Throughout the year, the president had been adamant that the only way for the Filipinos to finally be free of the suffering that COVID-19 has brought was to get the vaccines.
It would only come in a form of a vaccine.
He named the NAP chief implementer, Carlito Galvez Jr., the vaccine czar, who was tasked to be the spokesperson to procure the vaccines for the country. According to Galvez, their goal is to at least get 148 million vaccines this year. He aims to vaccinate 50 to 70 million within 2021, which is 70% of the population, the recommended percentage to achieve herd immunity.
And there you have it, the very first shot of COVID-19 vaccine officially, legally, and finally happening right here, PGH Manila.
The first 600,000 doses of Sinovac arrive in the Philippines on February 28, 2021. Thus, the vaccine rollout plan begins. Do you know anyone who went through the same thing that you did? And can you compare and contrast between the situations?
The one thing I can definitely sadly compare is Jasper, good friend, and my housemate, he didn't make it. We were just a day apart from getting positive, like when he confirmed he was positive. The day after, we took our test and then we got positive. It was just like days apart, and he was brought to SPMC, the public hospital here. He was in the ICU. He was on tubes. It's terrifying that it was just days apart and he's had a more aggravated condition, probably because he had tuberculosis, probably because he probably had COVID and he wasn't able, like, earlier on before the test when he started coughing. And it just sad that he didn't make it. Like, me and Aaron made it, and from what I've heard, at least from the few messages that we got to message each other with, and conversations with his girlfriend and the friends, like, he was really struggling. Like, he was in a lot of pain with the tubes, and it's terrifying that, like, we narrowly dodged the bullet. Like, it could have just happened to me. I could have been in the ICU if we didn't take the precautions, if we didn't take the antibiotics earlier on, um, and, like, we didn't go through the measures of, like, keeping track of our symptoms. Like, I could have been in the hospital as well. We just took the standard first gen meds, like the azithro, typical to deal with, like pneumonia and the lung stuff. We just took that because we treated it like parang a really bad cough that had bacteria. So luckily we got to dodge that. It's just from hearing from how Jazz went through in the ICU for the 2 weeks that we were staying in the facility, I can say there's like a huge difference. Like, I'm not on tubes. I'm I'm on a bed, occasional coughs, just resting. And then Jasper was in the hospital. Like, I'm fine now. I'm doing a lot more abuse to my body than Aaron would to his own, and he's the one who's still coughing. He's the one who's still like, that still has the effects, and we had to check his O2. Sometimes his O2 would drop. So yeah, I can really tell that my experience is not as bad as what, I mean, Jasper didn't make it. I did. So that's like a huge difference already. And I wish he was just given a chance to survive. I wish there was like a window where he, he didn't have to get that far. Like, I wish he got tested sooner, maybe. I wish that he was able to take antibiotics to treat the pneumonia. Um, those kinds of things. Like, if action was taken earlier on, maybe it would have, like, the death would have been avoided. I'd like to think that, but it's already happened.
Currently, the vaccines with emergency use authorization by the FDA are Pfizer-BioNTech, Oxford AstraZeneca, Sinovac Gamaleya Sputnik V, Johnson & Johnson's Janssen, and Bharat Biotech. Meanwhile, two of the approved vaccines are still in their phase 3 trials, Sinovac and Janssen. Clover, a vaccine not FDA approved yet, is also in its clinical trials in the Philippines. As reported by Rappler, the vaccines will be given first to the frontline health workers. This is to ensure that the people who will be carrying out the vaccine rollout in the coming months will be protected. In the second quarter, it is expected that more vaccines will be procured and the vulnerable sectors such as the senior citizens, indigenous people, and people living with comorbidities will be given priority. During this time, the government plans to vaccinate what they call the economic frontliners so that the economy can jumpstart once again. By the time that the third quarter comes, it is expected that the government's vaccine rollout plan will be fully activated and that around 25 million Filipinos will have their first shot. At the time of this recording, May 5, 2021, there has been a total of 1.6 million people who have received their first dose, and more than 300,000 of those are fully immunized. According to the website herdimmunity.ph, at this rate, it will take about 10.7 years to fully achieve herd immunity. Why?
She says not all of them have been vaccinated. That's because she's afraid. She says vaccines have caused the death of many children.
Many Filipinos feel hesitant to get the vaccine after the Dengvaxia scandal. When the manufacturer Sanofi Pasteur announced that those who received the shot and were not previously infected were prone to developing a more severe variant of dengue if they are infected, it sent the Filipino public to panic.
In San Pablo, Laguna, the body of 10-year-old Leonard Baldonado, who allegedly died also due to Dengvaxia, was exhumed Sunday afternoon.
The news started reporting of deaths linked to the vaccine. An investigation went underway, but it came back inconclusive. Under President Duterte, the DOH halted the vaccination program and banned Dengvaxia from the country. The government saw this as a way to attack the opposition, and thus was heavily politicized. Sanofi has defended the safety of the vaccine, citing that Dengvaxia was approved by the US FDA. The people are scarred, and immediately we see the effects of it. Outbreaks of diseases easily preventable by vaccines like measles and polio have come back.
Like, the thing I've observed actually is, at least from the stories I've been told when I was processing his papers in St. Peter and stuff, there's a lot of people who still don't believe COVID exists, even in the local scene. It's just something made by the doctors to make money. And there's like this divide of like, this can't be COVID, the denial of sorts that's instilled to us, hoping it isn't the case. That kind of delay could be like a life or death decision. And I just wish that people would take it more seriously. Like, as soon as you feel the symptoms, do something about it. Not just like, okay, when it gets really worse, that's when I do something. I think it's just instilled to most of us that we just like I hope it's not COVID. It's not going to be COVID. We need more, like, also that's why I want to talk about it, is that you don't have to be like, I am afraid of COVID. I am like, but it already happened, so there's nothing much I can do but take precautions afterwards and be aware and accept the fact that that is the reality, and we have to be more careful about things. And it's better to be proactively cautious and aware and not afraid that this is within the realm of possibilities. This is not something we should deny to ourselves. Like, we don't have to brush it off, especially something as serious as this. And it's no joke. It's not made up. People have died from it. Millions of people have died from it. I went through it. I don't want to have people go through it just to say, "Oh yeah, it's real." It like, I hope the denial goes away. I hope it becomes like you have to be conscious of the fact that this could be COVID and act on it.
Just recently, the country hit 1 million total COVID-19 cases. As such, it is still advised that we remain cautious with our surroundings and that we keep following the health and safety protocols of the DOH and the WHO. This means wearing your mask, frequent hand washing, avoiding large crowds, and maintaining a distance of 6 feet from people. If you can get the vaccine, then you should definitely get it. As many people still don't have jobs and cannot feed their families, and with the lack of government support, communities have banded together in different parts of the country to open up community pantries. These pantries are services that provide food to people who need them. Most of them are run based on taking what you need and giving what you can give. Support your community by giving to these pantries if you have the means. We must help each other since no one else will.
The thing they can do right now is there is an offer free swabs, at least in the local area. You can go to your local barangay, tell them that you'd like to be tested and be brought to the center. They will set up the ride for you. They'll just take information. The moment you get confirmed, expect that you will get isolated. Prepare your things, inform your boss, bring things that will keep your mind off the reality. Bring some books, bring your laptop, bring your phones, So, like, the steps to it, at least you did the part that you get yourself checked. When you get tested positive, immediately you have to inform your whoever is staying in with you, be it family or friends. They will have to go through the process too. Don't try to hide the information. I know it's like easy to just say, oh, there's no one else staying with me. Like, it's also good to have them tested as well. Just go through that just to make sure they're safe. Just try to get yourself tested, and if you do get positive, inform the people that you live with, so that they will understand the process that they have to be brought to the center and get swabbed as well, and prepare for a possible isolation if they get positive.
It is also important that we exercise our rights as citizens of this country. Never forget to hold the people in charge accountable for their actions. Remember, the bare minimum that our leaders should be doing is doing their jobs properly.
If your place doesn't offer free swabs, demand it. You should have that given right to get yourself tested for free without having to spend money for it. And you don't have to be afraid that the virus will get to you at one point if you take a proactive approach to it, and like, take your precautions and immediately get yourself tested when the symptoms come up, when you feel something's off. You have to you can't be passive about it. It's okay not to be in control of things. Like, this 2020 up to now has been shit. That doesn't make you any less of a human being. We're all universally suffering from this global pandemic. And the fear of things not going back to normal. That's a legit fear, but that shouldn't be something that would stop you from looking forward to things or make rash decisions of doing things in the moment.
Misinformation, incompetence, and COVID-19. It is up to us to defeat the diseases that plague the Philippines. This special episode of the frightening, alarming, real-life tales show was hosted, produced, researched, written, and edited by me, Andrew Topino. Thank you to Mars for being so brave and coming on the show to talk about your experience. Also, thank you to Joshua Ade Valenzona, Wesley Satira, V. Anika Miguel, and Notch of the Precious Thoughts podcast for contributing to the special. This episode is dedicated to Mars's friend, Jasper. May you rest in peace.